Good day. My name is Russell Rice, VP of Product Strategy at Ordr. Today's webinar is going to focus on how leading healthcare organizations are securing connected medical devices. We're going to review why this is an important problem, what the key ingredients you need for a solution must contain, why Ordr is a great match for that, and I'll detail some of the key capabilities Ordr brings to the table. Throughout this presentation, I'm not only going to provide slides, but present a lot of demonstration materials so you get a visceral feel for what the product does. I also intend to interweave this conversation with actual customer experiences of people who've deployed the Ordr product. I also want to assure you that this webinar is going to be useful for large numbers of different organizations within a healthcare organization, whether it's health services, security operations, or even IT. So without further ado, let's begin. So what's the challenge? The real challenge we're focused on right now is that healthcare organizations are powered by large numbers of devices that are unmanaged and not part of the IT suite of operations in terms of deployment, monitoring, making sure they're healthy. In fact, most of them don't even fall within the jurisprudence of information security and their normal operations for tracking if they're infected, what vulnerabilities they have, and how to remediate systems. And unfortunately, the numbers of devices that we're talking about that actually power the healthcare organizations is vast. There's between 15 and 17 IoT and medical devices per bed. So if you kind of do the math, for many large organizations, that can be tens of thousands of systems that we're actually dealing with right now. The reason why they're different is these are not user-based systems, and they're not managed by IT in their traditional ways of defining what software runs on them, managing that software, and being responsible for ensuring all the management tools and security technology is deployed on those to protect them against known vulnerabilities and against malware attacks. Instead, these devices tend to be appliances where you purchase them, you deploy them, and basically you keep them in operation for as long as you possibly can. You don't control the software that runs on them. In fact, you often can't put additional software. And unfortunately, most of these devices run antiquated operating systems. In fact, you'd be surprised how many types of systems we run into that are running Windows 7 and Windows XP, which are obviously very old. And because these are running old and vulnerable operating systems, and because they're also connected to the same environment where your nurses, your patients, your doctors, and other employees are also connecting into, they become vulnerable to any form of malware, ransomware, or other form of infestation. And there are lots of cases where these systems have been attacked. When I first joined Ordr, I will call out that the WannaCry virus had just hit the streets. And obviously, I think anybody who's been in healthcare for the last 4 years has a visceral understanding and remembrance of what really went on with WannaCry. I mean, the amount of effort that went around to find out which systems actually had a problem and to deal with those, to figure out methods to install any vendor patches if they happen to come out, which often was taking a long time, and figuring out how to make sure those systems could be operational without actually being disrupted was a very visceral issue for most organizations today. But WannaCry was not the only one. There's been many, many examples of things that have gone on where systems have been disrupted due to different malware exploits. And it's not that these types of devices have always been the initial targets for what the software was going after. Often they go after, financial gain by locking a system down and making people pay to unlock the encrypted data, or just to cause havoc or to get the data in the first place. But in these cases, we're really talking with disrupting and making the systems infeasible for using or being used for other nefarious purposes. So I've got several here that are kind of showing it, from Mirai, which targeted cameras, to SmartNet attacks, and even the most recent Ripple 20, which, while it hasn't yet been weaponized, it absolutely has an impact in terms of it allows remote execution of arbitrary code on a system. And there's hundreds of devices right now that have been identified that have this vulnerability out there. So this issue is really real and visceral and something that people need to pay attention to. With that in mind, I'll offer that Ordr as a solution to help protect these assets has been adopted by large numbers of leading healthcare organizations. We've been very fortunate as an organization to benefit from partnerships with people like Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, who are adopters and using our technology right now. And there are obviously some people that are very well known, but a lot of other organizations, whether the National Institute of Health, Christus Health, Harris Health, numerous others are also using this technology. And we're fortunate also that everybody who's deployed our technology continues to use it and is very happy with it. And so we hope to join you to that mix. Let me go in now into the ingredients of a solution and what you actually need to solve. I would offer that there's 4 major questions you want to be able to answer and have a good answer for in order to protect all of your medical and other OT and IoT equipment in an environment. And they're shown here. The first question is getting authoritative understanding of all of your connected devices, what they are, where they are, and that information for many is something that they often have had to traditionally do physical inspection to figure out what's around. But what we really need is a technique and methodology that allows you to do this in an automated way, where the information about all of your assets can be learned passively with no disruption in your environment, provide high accuracy where it's completely correct, tracks any moves, adds, and changes, but also dives down into the details of what these assets actually are. And by that I mean is actually able to identify assets, not just saying, hey, there's something out there, but saying, hey, that's an Alaris infusion pump, here's its serial number, and here's the software load level that it's running. That's the level of detail that you want about all of your assets, and that's really the holy grail. Once you're able to identify all of your connected assets and what they are, the next thing you want to be able to do is monitor exactly what they're doing. What this really means is getting into the bowels of all the communications that this device is having with any other system in the environment and what all the communications other systems have with that asset. It also means you want to build in baseline understanding of what this device should do and shouldn't do so that you can flag any potential abnormality. So that notion of baselining becomes very important. The problem that you tend to run into is baselining has to be done at scale. Every single type of IoT, OT, and medical device has a different communication profile. And it's important to be able to baseline each one and make sure each one is accurate. And again, you can be dealing with hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of different types of baselines depending upon the different types of assets you've got in an environment. In fact, different models of cameras from the same manufacturer, for example, can have completely different baseline communications. But you want to watch all of them. That obviously requires some form of automation, which is something Ordr brings to the table. The next thing that you want to do is understand which assets are vulnerable. You want to do this because you need to understand where you need to spend your time in terms of which assets are most important to protect. And the vulnerability assets bring to the table is one of the two core ingredients for you to figure out where your time needs to be spent. The other, obviously, is the criticality that asset has to your business. Ordr will bring to the capability of you being able to analyze the vulnerabilities, both published and on-the-ground awareness of vulnerabilities that are exposed for all of your unmanaged devices in this regard. The fourth piece, and most important, and honestly the reason why I joined this company, is at the end of the day, this is about protecting the devices you care about. You know, it's great to know what you got. It's great to know what you got, what's vulnerable. But at the end of the day, your objective is to protect it. To make sure that even if it has vulnerabilities against the latest set of malware that's come out, you can have assurance that you can continue to use it safely. What this gets into is implementing techniques called segmentation or microsegmentation or zero trust security around the assets that are most important to you, and being able to do that in a streamlined and rather effortless fashion. Historically, that has been a very complex thing to do, and most organizations who've tried have failed, even if they're trying to use the latest technologies in firewalls and network access control solutions. Ordr brings unique capabilities in this area that can complement your use of firewalls and NAC technology to actually protect these devices in an effective and measurable way and audit the results. So with that in mind, let's dive into the Ordr solution a bit more so you get a feel for it. The way Ordr works is pretty straightforward. We deploy sensors in your environment passively in the network. They're watching all the communications in your environment, both to and from your assets. They provide deep, rich information as they're monitoring the devices by being able to understand what those devices actually are as they share information about themselves with other systems in your environment. And through that mechanism, we're able to build a large data lake of all the inventory you've got with a high level of accuracy, as well as complete span of control and visibility around what they all are. So we can see everything that's connected, wired or wireless, and provide insight into all of them. And this data lake that we're providing of all the assets kind of powers the entire process of what you need to happen in the next steps of now monitoring each asset and understanding what it's doing and developing what we call a flow genome of every asset, which is really figuring out what that baseline conversation path is and should be for any given type of device that's local to your environment. So this system will understand that your asset, that maybe a camera, is talking to its video camera database system and storing its video images it's collecting, and it knows the IP addresses of where those are. either in your data center or in the cloud. It knows where the camera management system is. It knows where patch updates are being received from. But that's all that that camera should be doing. Likewise, an infusion pump will learn all the communication that an infusion pump should and shouldn't have and be able to understand that so we can see if there's any abnormalities in conversations. One of the reasons why we build those baselines for all of your unique devices is that then allows us to build policy enforcements and control, basically, that we can impart into the network environment, either through NAC or firewall technologies, or even directly into your switched and wireless infrastructure, that allows us to microsegment or provide zero trust around those devices so they're only allowed to do conversations they need to get their job done and nothing else can happen. So this process from identification, collection and inventory, generating flow genomes for all your devices, and protecting them is the heart of the Ordr system. And we try to make this very easy for you to implement. Let's do a walk through the several key areas of this system right now so you really get a feel for it at another level of detail. I mentioned that the system first focuses on discovering and classifying devices. This allows us to answer some of those fundamental questions the business has. What assets do I have in what quantities and where are they? Do I have any strange devices that I don't expect? For example, in healthcare, you obviously don't plug in Alexis into your medical environments like your emergency centers or where your patients are because you're not supposed to capture conversations. You can glean how many servers you may have in certain parts of your environment. You can find out which systems are running old operating systems. This kind of technology and capability is really night and day from what you may be used to experiencing. I mean, within 2 hours of deploying our technology, you're going to see a Christmas tree light up of all the devices that our system has understood and identified in your environment, which is just fascinating. And we can do this kind of stuff at scale. The next step of the equation, as I mentioned, is baselining the communication patterns. And here I'm showing you some screens that we're going to actually do some demos around that show you that we're tracking all the communications of every single device. And the visualizations that you're seeing here really focus on seeing what the device is talking to, whether it's things on the internet or things that are not on the internet. And we color code information to let you know what's normal and what's not, and can tie in abnormal conversations with issuing alarms and alerts and other things that will bring your attention to them should you want. It also helps us allow any infected systems or any systems under attack, which also becomes really important. The next piece of the equation of our product allows you to, from a top-down perspective, assess risk of all of your devices. Ordr risk scores every asset. Ordr identifies every vulnerability we're aware of, or every potential exploit activity that's going on, or every indication of compromise, and rolls that up into a security dashboard and attaches all of those incidents to each device and provides high information about the device, the owner, where it is, and what the security issue is around it, and how severe that issue actually is. This display and dashboard I'm showing you here is an example of how we render that for you, but you can equally well have this information flow over to whatever security operation tool the team tends to be using as well. Another capability that the system brings to the table is the ability to actually protect assets. We do this through implementing segmentation and automating the process for developing the policy, pushing the policy out to the system that you actually want to provide that segmentation, and thus allow you to control the communications to and from any critical asset you choose incrementally. So if in the first month you choose to focus on known vulnerabilities with some Windows 7 systems you have out, you can do that. If then you want to shift your lens to deal with an infusion pump that has a known vulnerability that you're concerned about, then you can do that the next month. And basically you can take steps, measurable steps, month by month, week by week, quarter by quarter, to allow you to protect your environment effectively. One large area people tend to focus on when they think about medical device security, and this is specifically around medical devices, is how do you reconcile what we actually see that's connected in your environment with what has actually gone through your procurement and your maintenance systems in terms of the systems that you're aware of, and reconciling those, both to understand, do you have some assets that are deployed that have never gone through proper procurement and compliance and onboarding procedures? Do you have devices that you think you own but are actually not in use and have not been in use for a long period of time? And how do you bring kind of compliance into all of that thing? So the integration with Ordr into CMMS tools allows us to make sure the inventory process is streamlined and effective. But beyond that, integration with these CMMS tools also allows us to improve security awareness in those CMMS tools, which tend to be what the health services team is using day by day. And so being able to identify which assets have known outstanding FDA recall notices, or which assets may have CVEs or ICS certs noticed on them, or which assets are actually under attack or acting strangely. we can provide all that information over to those CMMS tools. And finally, there's some utilization information that can also flow over, which is talking about when those devices are actually given patient care. With that in mind, actually, let me dovetail and talk about the patient care. And here's where I would like to give one of my first call outs in terms of a customer engagement that we have right now. One of the big things that we're able to do outside of protecting medical assets is actually to track medical device utilization. And while this isn't a security objective, it's actually a business objective to help understand and manage your fleet effectively. For example, in many environments, if you tend to have requests to purchase additional medical equipment on a periodic basis. And the problem that you tend to run into as a business is understanding, do you actually need them or not? And so what this really gets into is understanding the current sets of devices you've got, how often they're being used, where they happen to be located, and then when you think about fleet management, deciding, do you need more, do you have enough, or do you need less, or do you need to reposition where those equipment actually are located? We partnered with Pro Health, which is an institution you may be familiar with, and especially a gentleman by the name of Robert Budwick there, who helped us define really what the medical device utilization technology needed to do so that he could more effectively manage their medical device acquisition process. And we ended up forming a great partnership. And now that organization, among several, use our capability in this medical device utilization to make sure that they're doing fleet management effectively. I'll give some demonstration on all of the capabilities that I just talked about, but I wanted to call these out for you. The last few slides before we go into the demo, I'll do pretty quickly. The first is Ordr, at the end of the day, is a data lake platform, and it has comprehensive integrations with a variety of different tooling used by different parts of the organization, whether it's the security team who's responsible for security tools like firewalls or endpoint protection or NAC, whether it's the IT team who's responsible for a lot of the network infrastructure, whether it's the team responsible for the devices who procures them, like the health services guys, and they want to integrate into CMDB tooling. Ordr provides that data lake because it is the flashlight that's able to obtain information about all of the assets you've got and be accurate about it. So we're kind of the system of record for all of the asset information of what's connected. And we're also the system of record for all the communications of what they're doing and whether it's good or bad and what level of risk they may ride. And that information helps fuel technology and processes that you have across all of the different teams. And by all of the different teams, I'm really going to be referring to the security, the health services, as well as the HTM teams who are responsible for this equipment. I'll also call out that our technology can be deployed in two core ways. You can deploy it such that we are operating the database and the service and the front and kind of the administrative front end in our facilities running on Amazon. And then all you're doing is deploying sensors and then connecting up to our infrastructure to make sure that we're managing the environment effectively and allowing you to identify your assets and secure them appropriately. In this case, it's a very low touch in terms of what you need to deploy in your environment, just sensors that are headless in your environment, and away you go. But some organizations prefer to have the full solution deployed in their environment. And in that case, the database and the management and all the information that's stored is actually in your data centers and under your control. We have organizations who do either one of these ways. In all cases, we don't deal nor track with any patient information or other regulated data. So nothing we store has any complications in that regard. But either one of these options are effective for you. So without further ado, let me flip over and now do a demonstration for you of the Ordr product. Here is the Ordr tool. I'm showing it to you through a browser, which is the interface that you use to manage the environment. The first thing I'm highlighting is a dashboard view of our system. And I'm showing you information that we've got in a demonstration environment setup that's running in our facilities. In this environment, you'll notice at the high level, we've discovered about 12,000 different types of devices. If we were to deploy this in your environment, we would find out how many devices there are in your environment and be able to provide the insight as to how many they are, which ones are IoT, which ones are not IoT. And you'd see that information in real time as our system learns and discovers all of your assets. And again, we're going to find every asset. Anything that connects in, we're going to remember things that have walked away. And so you'll get a good, accurate count of all of your enterprise assets that are connected to your environment. As I scroll down, I want to call your attention to what the system automatically does in terms of identifying assets by type. And that's specifically in this classification area here on the left. The system automatically classifies devices by their business purpose so that you can get aggregate views of how many facilities devices do I have? In this case, almost 2,000. How many medical devices do I have? In this case, we've got over 1,300. Physical security, like cameras or badge readers. Media devices, like TV systems and the like. So the system is quantifying devices based on their type for you automatically. And you can drill into any one of these, which I'll do in a moment. But beyond that, the system is also providing summary information about things like manufacturer data, like which devices are made by what manufacturer and what quantity that you've got. And you notice that we've got a lot of laptop type systems at the high levels, but then you start getting to GE, Axis, Philips, and the like. In addition, the system learns the operating system that's running on these devices. And again, it does this passively, but you'll automatically be able to draw eyeballs towards obsolete OSs like Windows 7 and Windows XPs that I talked about before, and the quantity of assets that you have, and then it'll be able to call out specifically what those assets are. The system is also tracking security risk information about devices, and that's summarized here in this screen. It turns out in this environment we've got 17 devices that we would call it critical risk, and we'll dive into that a bit later. We've got a lot of devices. In fact, the majority of the fleet doesn't have any issue around it. As I scroll up, you're going to see some information that's often relevant for the IT team, which gets into where those devices actually located in my environment. And here you're seeing that we're able to summarize what VLAN and what subnet each device is in, and you can again drill into all of that information. A few other things I'd like to call out in this screen is that the system also tracks usage in terms of how often that device is online. It is online right now. And how long it's been offline if it is no longer plugged in. And in that regard, this becomes very useful when you want to find out which systems haven't been used or even connected in the last 30 days or 60 days. Because most likely those systems have either been retired or they've accidentally walked away. And often organizations want to find especially the systems that have walked away so that you can deal with the reclamation processes. We're also able to identify any new assets that come in and tell you how long they've been there. And so many organizations, most of whom we do interact with, actually have a regular meeting where they want to review any net new system that's come on that's germane to their operations to make sure they're what they expect them to be. So we can tell you what systems have been newly discovered in the last 24, a week, 14 days, whatever it may be in a quick summary form. Let's drill in and look at assets in a bit more depth. And by that, I'm going to go into the next level of grouping that we do for assets. So when the system automatically learns about assets, not only does it put it into a business function like medical devices, which is what you're seeing here, but we're going to even subdivide that further into what we call profiles, which is really putting like types of assets together in groups. So in this case, what you're seeing is pictures and counts of numbers of specific types of devices that we've discovered that are down to basically think of it as almost the model number differentiation. So whether it's GE ultrasound machines from LogicQ, whether it's and different models that you're seeing here, whether we're dealing with CT scanners, for example. As I scroll along, you're going to see other types of devices that we've got, not just from GE, but whether it's Parcus, whether it's Philips equipment. All of these types of assets you're seeing us discover and quantify for you automatically. And so as new systems get purchased and installed, we will increase the counts. As systems go away, we'll become aware of all of that. But you're getting this high-level grouping information, again, automatically. I didn't have to do any work to obtain this data. Now here, you're seeing us look at medical devices. I've got some accelerants where I can turn around and take a look at just my facilities equipment. So by clicking on this button, I'm going to flip over and just do a view that's showing me all of my facilities devices. And in this case, you're seeing some UPS. You're seeing a variety of other systems, whether they're vacuum cleaners, for example, robot vacuum cleaners. This is the type of information that your facilities team would be very useful in gleaning and understanding, tritium controllers and the like, where you can see all of this information for you automatically, so you can get a feel for all of your facilities equipment in the same environment. Likewise, I can drill in and show you physical security equipment. In this case, this is largely cameras, although it could also badge readers fall into this complex. And here you're seeing us break down cameras by model number. Again, there's a rich information you're getting about all of your assets and what they are. And let's dive into that now. When I look at the specific devices that I've got, I'm going to drill into the infusion pumps, of which I've got 28 in this environment. So by clicking on this, here's a list of all of my 28 infusion pumps that I've got from BD, my Alaris infusion pumps. And let's pick one and take a look at what we've learned about it. So when I double click on this device, you're going to see me provide a wealth of information, again, that the system has learned automatically for me. I've got an infusion pump. Here's the serial number the infusion pump has. Here's the software load level that it's running. I've got information about where it's actually connected and is it connected right now. You're seeing its location. You're seeing its actual, in this case, switch port. You're seeing the VLAN. You're seeing the switch that it's connected to. You're seeing, and you're also seeing whether it's wireless connected as well, which in this case, this is a wireless device. You're seeing subnets and VLAN information. So basically all that connectivity data about this asset, you get at your disposal as well. And as assets move around, if they switch different APs and they switch SSIDs, we're going to track all of that. As you know, we grouped this device. This infusion pump was put into the medical device group, and specifically it was an Alaris infusion pump. But we're also tracking risk level information that I'll show a little bit later in the demonstration. But you see we're tracking specific security incidents with this device, how many we've got. We've got 98 incidents with this device. It's got an overall risk score of 6. Again, so what we've done is we've assembled a lot of information about this asset for you. And this level of granularity is really what fuels our ability to provide that data lake of asset intelligence that we can reconcile with your inventory management tools, your security operations, and enrich all of it. Let's flip over from talking about the device information that we're learning and now show you information about what the device is doing. And I'd mentioned before in the slides that we track what we call the flow genome, which is really the communication patterns that this device is involved with in your environment. Who is it talking to and who's talking to it? We track all of that for all of your devices, and we render it in a way to try to make it easy for you to understand. And so that's what you're looking at right now. And this flow genome, which is what I'm showing you right now and highlighting with my mouse, is an embodiment of all the communications this device has had in your environment. Each one of these trapezoids represents a different system this infusion pump has been talking to. And you're seeing information about that other system over here that I'm circling right now in the middle and the right-hand side. So each trapezoid represents a different device this ADIS is talking to. And you get details about its communication over here on the right-hand side of what specific protocol. In this case, we're talking about DNS was in conversation and how many bytes transmit and receive and all that good stuff. The same summary data is shown down below here in what's called a Sankey diagram, where the infusion pump is on the left-hand side and all the assets that are talking to are on the right-hand side. Now, color coding is really important. All of these cells happen to be blue, which means we believe this is part of the baseline communications for this infusion pump in your environment. What that means in English is that we're telling you we believe these are normal conversations and expected for this asset in your specific environment based on what we've learned. If we saw communications that did not make sense, you'd see different colors appearing here, like yellow and red, which tell us different levels of severity we have concerns that we're seeing conversations that don't make any sense for this asset. So this type of information about the communications this device is involved with, we track for every asset. So I can click on another infusion pump, I can see information about that infusion pump, I can likewise see my flow genome for that infusion pump, and really get details on an asset by asset by asset basis of what it is, where it is, who it's talking to, and is that good or bad conversation. Let me flip over and provide a couple of other views that we have for that same asset in terms of how it's communicating and where it's located in a view that often IT teams tend to benefit from, but everybody gets an appreciation for because it really gives you a topological understanding of where things are. In this case, I'm calling out what we call a constellation view, where all of the assets we've identified and we've placed in the different VLANs in your environment. And so VLANs tends to be one of the areas of the network that you tend to put devices in. So when they plug in to a switch port or connect via wireless, they get assigned a certain VLAN in your network. And we're tracking all the VLANs in your environment because we learn them automatically. And each of these hexagons that I'm clicking on is a different set of VLANs. In fact, you see the VLAN ID changing over here. I can see all of the devices that are in that VLAN in the click of a button. And here you're seeing in this VLAN, we've got a lot of GT tracking systems and the like. If I flip over to another VLAN, you're going to see here that we've got some tube systems and some Honeywell controllers. So likewise, we're going to learn all of the information about what assets and where they are in your environment and represent it. Furthermore, we can show you information about the communications that are going on between all of the assets in that VLAN and any other VLAN. So by way of example, if I choose to look at this VLAN where we've got some microservers, I can turn around and understand exactly all the communication it has in terms of internal services and other VLAN that's talking to. This type of audit and data mining is revolutionary. Most organizations don't have an ability to really understand what they've got, who it's talking to, and then kind of pull back and map that to your network environment. We're showing you that for VLANs. We can also do the same and show it for subnets, which is I'm now showing here. So we've got all the subnets listed, what VLANs are part of the subnet, which I'm showing you now, and then what devices are in that subnet as well. So that very clear understanding of where things are connected and where they are in your environment, what they are, is something Ordr really brings to the table. And again, no humans were needed to get this. As soon as we deploy, you're going to get access to this type of information automatically, which is amazingly powerful. Let me flip over and bring you to another dashboard, which is our security interface. And I showed this to you in the slides, but this is where you're getting insight into the security activity that we've seen that is of concern that we're bringing to your attention. And kind of bringing a couple of other case studies for customers that we've been in, we've almost every single environment that we've deployed into, we've absolutely detected a series of issues that were, worthy of attention. We actually had a cab session that recently occurred where one of our customers who'd more recently acquired our technology discovered that they actually had some gateway controllers that manned some of their physical gateways for controlling cars being able to come in their parking lot. And it turns out that those were actually network connected. And they found that they actually had and were communicating to some bad URLs, and they were actually under control with another system. And so obviously that was rapidly fixed once our system got deployed and they were able to discover it. But the fact that that was even going on was completely, unknown to them. I will say also we found numerous occasions where medical equipment has also had known issues where it's actually been compromised. But one of the things that almost every organization immediately benefits from is wanting to understand kind of known vulnerabilities about equipment. And here, in every engagement we've had, the association of us providing FDA recall information and which assets those FDA recalls apply to, and making that automatic for them is a huge boon rather than the manual processes that they've been doing thus far. And so here you can see that I've got FDA recall notices tied to specific devices. I can look a little bit more deeply and understand what this recall actually is. I can provide reference information if I choose to look it up. And then we've got a list of all of the assets that I could click on and go see every device that recall applied to. So here you're seeing, again, all of these recalls from the FDA mapped to your specific inventory with no human having to do it. We've done the same for ICS certs when those get listed as well. So that's one of the pieces that comes into the equation. But there's a variety of other security checks that we have as well. We can tell when assets are reaching out to bad websites, when they're going to phishing sites, when they're going to blacklisted sites. All of that becomes visible to you. Anything that's involved in crypto mining, and you're going and doing observed things that are related to crypto mining, which that happened in one instance where we had an organization where one of the workstations they had fronting some medical equipment had actually been used by employees when it shouldn't be for web browsing, and they'd actually converted into a crypto mining site too. So they were actually trying to mint some money on the side. And so obviously that was against policy, and so they rectified that. But we also track other types of activities going on. So if we see Trojans, if we see signs of Version 11 going on, even the latest Ripple 20 attack, we've got ways to detect if we see these communication patterns going on. So you're getting insight into some of the latest attack forms and whether they're actually occurring in your environment, which is a huge boon for visibility. And again, we'll show you all the details of the assets involved with that and what specific things that we see. So this summarization of security issues is what you're seeing on the top row here that our tool is providing insight into. On the bottom row, what you're seeing is a summarizing information based on risk scoring devices. So we're actually categorizing every device in your environment as to whether it's at critical risk, high risk, or medium risk. And you can drill into the specific assets in question to find out what is it about these 17 devices, for example, that causes them to be in critical risk. And I can click on them. And I can kind of drill into any given device that I want to find out what's going on. But you're seeing I've got a mix of workstations, printers, physical security devices, facilities equipment, industrial devices, medical devices, a variety of things here have problems. Let's click into this medical device and find out what's up with it. So here's the medical device in question. It's an X-ray machine, as you can see. And if I click on this tab, the security incidents for this device are going to summarize the issues that we've seen. And oh my, there's a lot of problems with this device, as you can kind of see. It looks like it's been compromised, and SMB as the protocol vehicle that was used to get it. But there's a lot of information about the details of what we found with it, why these vulnerabilities are a problem, what type of beaconing response we see going on, and why we think that this system has actually been compromised, completely. This is the type of information that the security team wants to really understand. What are the fingerprints that lead us to say that we've got problems, and details around them, and that's what our system is providing for you. And so, honestly, the different types of security activities or issues that we see to the devices can be vast. Whether we see systems that just have bad passwords that you need to change, systems that have obviously been compromised, which you might need to reinstall software, or systems that are exhibiting known vulnerabilities or have published vulnerabilities that are significant enough that you want to implement compensating controls to protect them to make sure that they can't be impaired because you're highly concerned and they're important pieces of equipment. With that in mind, I actually want to move over to the protection capabilities that our tool brings to the table as well. And so, as I'd mentioned when we were originally talking, organizations can use our system to now actually protect assets. And they can do that incrementally as well, which becomes very, very valuable. So let's go through the scenario where, hey, I've got my Alaris infusion pumps, and they've got, and I don't mean to call out Alaris in particular, but it's just one that I'll demonstrate for you. And we're at the time where we know there's a vulnerability with those infusion pumps, and we would like to implement microsegmentation or zero-touch protection around those devices without impacting their function so they can still go, but I don't want to affect the rest of my environment. How can I go do that? That example that I'm giving you is a real world one in terms of most organizations that we're in with, and there's a large organization right now that's going down the path of wanting to protect all of its Windows 7 assets because they can't get rid of them. They've got thousands and thousands of them on the medical side, and they just want to implement microsegmentation. So that same model is what I'm walking through you here right now. So here, if I want to look at these infusion pumps, I've got 28 of them. Here's the actual 28 infusion pumps in a list form. I'm going to turn around and drill into one of the infusion pumps. Here's details about it, as I think I showed you before. And if I want to now protect it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage the information that our system has gleaned about what the device's communication are and whether they're normal or not. But I'm going to flip around and use that information to actually develop a policy which can be enforced in the network to protect it. And so if we take the same information about who it's talked to and provide it in more of a rule form, which I'm showing here, you're seeing us provide a set of rules that anybody who's been doing firewall management or access control on infrastructure will be able to understand. It's basically a series of communications saying who's the system talked to, over what port, using what kind of protocol, and was this expected or not. And so our system has decided that all of these types of communications are normal, and we can take that kind of information now and turn that into a policy. And by that, what I'm really saying is I can take these communications, say, I expect this to be normal for what my infusion pump can do. I don't want anything else to happen outside of these conversations, so let's lock that down. And I can take that and lock it down. And what that means is I can generate policies that I can pass to firewalls or to switches and NAC tools and wireless infrastructure to have those protect that asset through segmentation to lock it down and make sure those are the only communications we allow and nothing else. And what's gone on there when we do this is that Ordr is telling the firewall, telling the NAC, and telling the network what the devices are. It's maintaining that knowledge of what the device is and what its IP address is in the network. And then it's building the policy of basically rules to enforce that device can only have these communications and nothing else. So you can have your firewall protect it, or your switch protect it, or your wireless controller protect it. Under the covers, what we're really doing with those devices, when we talk to NAC, when we talk to the infrastructure, when we talk to firewalls, is we're passing them configuration information that they need to enforce that locks down the communication of those devices. And we translate the communications of what these policies mean to the specific system that needs to enforce them. So we're developing specific configuration commands for different pieces of infrastructure. I was showing you Cisco. Here's some extreme switches commands that you can be doing. We can pass information over to wireless controllers, in this case Cisco. We can pass information to a variety of firewall technologies and other wireless stuff. So here's a Fortinet firewall configuration. As I scroll down, you're going to see the same thing for a Palo Alto firewall configuration. We've got the same for Checkpoint. So what you're really seeing is our tool has the intelligence to automate the hard part of the protection side for dealing with medical devices, unmanaged devices, other OT and IoT systems, where we can build the rules and push them to the firewall and manage that whole part of the process to make sure all of those devices are as protected as your user systems, which is what those devices were usually designed to help protect. And so this is kind of a big reveal for us, and this is one of the core capabilities that our tool brings to the table that is rather unique. The ability to go through that whole life cycle, as I'd mentioned, and kind of pulling back now and doing a summary of what I've walked through. Our system, when you deploy it, will really answer those 4 big steps that we talked about in the very beginning. Being able to identify all of your assets, being able to identify exactly what they are, being able to drill into exactly what they are, into your facilities equipment, into your medical devices, and having a firm understanding of all of those. The next step of being able to understand all the communications of what the devices are doing and who they're talking to by looking at those communications and being able to identify whether they're good or bad. And then the system is able to monitor and tell you risk levels. Which devices have high risk, which devices have low risk. In this summary screen, again, if you remember, that's where this summarization is going on. And then lastly, being able to lock down and protect your assets. So Ordr allows you to go from step 1 to step 4 during that process. And you can do it at scale in your environment. You can do it whether you want our entire system deployed in your environment or you'd like to leverage a SaaS delivery model. I hope you found this presentation useful, and we'd welcome any questions that you may have.